welcome to my post-Summer Showdown Overwatch League power rankings and a bit of a recap as well. It's been a little bit since I've uploaded a video. It's been a lot longer than I intended for it to be since the last video I uploaded, and the reason for that is because the meta changed unbelievably drastically between now and my last video. The Overwatch League meta changed, that is, unbelievably drastically, and before I wanted to put a power rankings together, I really wanted to get a better understanding of it. I really wanted to get the best understanding that I could. So I sort of went back, went over some VODs, used the Overwatch League player to go over some VODs, and look at why some teams were successful, some teams were less successful, and sort of get my head around the ridiculous amount of upsets that happened this week, because oh my god, there were so many upsets this week. It's actually sort of mind-blowing how many upsets there were, just because I don't think anyone could have ever predicted some of the matches this weekend. So yeah, I just wanted to sort of get my head around it and get a better understanding of the meta so that I can properly sort of judge where some of these teams belong. Because I don't think Toronto Defiant sort of belonged in that finals. I think they got a little bit lucky to get there. You know, for example, the Toronto Defiant, I should say. There's another couple teams that I think were maybe a little higher up in terms of how far they managed to go in the Summer Showdown, then I think they actually should be on power rankings. And yeah, I just essentially there was a big long pause between uploads because I just really wanted to get a better understanding of this meta so that I could give some proper power rankings. But essentially, yeah, that's why there's been such a long pause between videos. I think I have a decent understanding of how it should be run, and I'll talk about it as I go through the power rankings. And also when I talk about each team, I'll sort of give a little recap about them. I would prefer to do sort of the power rankings and the recap as separate videos, but honestly the topics are so similar, I thought I might as well just put it together, and I'll do another one for the APAC region hopefully soon, hopefully either the same day as this video is uploaded or the day after. That should come out. So yeah, keep an eye out for that one. As for content coming up this week, I may do a video sort of explaining how the meta should be played in a little bit more detail, different takes on the meta that have been given to us from different teams, possibly. Anyway, I'll get more into that at the end of the video. On with the actual power rankings themselves. In 13th place, I think the only place I can really put this team that would be fair is the Boston Uprising, just because, you know, they haven't played this week, so I can't really say with any sort of definitive meaning. Like, I can't really say where they would be placed in comparison to all the other teams since they haven't played this week. So 13th place I think is just automatically Boston Uprising. 12th though is the LA Gladiators, and I don't think anyone can really argue that they should be higher anymore, because holy shit, they've had so much. Even the players on this team that I thought were like such consistent players that they'd never sort of dip below the rest of the team's standards, even they were just feeding so much space. What were you doing on Junkertown, man? Like, what was he doing? Seriously, like, letting himself sort of, instead of dying on cart, just letting himself die so they can't retouch in overtime? Are you kidding me? This is basic stuff. I see people in Masters at least even knowing to do this. How do they mess that up? That's something that is such an egregious mistake. I can't look over that. It's and it wasn't just space, to be fair to him. It was just the rest of the team, just they did not really understand this meta. At the very least, they did play it. They did play the Genji. They attempted, which is better than what I can say for some other teams on the power rankings. But in terms of their skill, it was just not good enough. It really wasn't. And granted, they beat a team that I think was actually pretty good this meta. Granted they lost to a team that is actually pretty good this meta. They looked so bad. They really, there's nothing really good that I can say about them. If I'm being completely honest, I can't think of much good. I think Birdring didn't look bad. Cloudy actually had some really good performances. That's about all I can say, honestly. If I had to give this team any advice, I would say try and play with Cloudy and just go full on. I know last week I said that they need to learn the meta and they should sort of stop forcing Cloudy to play Rhine, and they should learn to play the Orisa, and they should learn to play the meta, and maybe mold OG into a more of a leadership figure so he can properly take over when Cloudy's not in the lineup. I know I said that last week, but at this point, honestly, they look so bad when they play OG, and honestly, they just need to commit to running Rhine. They need to commit to running Rhine comps, and they need to just commit to OG. They remind me of Houston Outlaws last season, where Outlaws sort of played their own style and they were successful at it, but then they would switch to the normal expected GOAT style and be really bad at it, but they would keep playing this GOAT style instead of doing their own unique style, which they were really good at. Gladiators are kind of doing the same thing right now, and I think they should just fully invest in going for that more unique style that they can play, because at the very least they can play it, and I cannot say the same for the meta right now. They can't, they were awful. Anyway, moving on from LA Gladiators, because I could go on forever about them. In 11th place, still 11th place, Vancouver Titans, because as much as I do think as a team they are improving, I really don't have much to say about them. They are just in a pretty unlucky meta for them right now. They don't really have a Genji player on their team. Dalton was trying to play the Genji, but he's not really a Genji player. I've never known in Dalton's whole career him playing Genji. So, yeah, Dalton on Genji is quite uncomfortable for this team, and I think it showed, and that's why they tried to play the Tracer a little bit more. And then even then, he's not exactly the greatest Tracer player in the world, and I think this meta is just not a good one for them. And even though I think they are improving as a team massively, I can't really reflect that in my rankings just because this meta is not good for them. I don't see them getting any better this meta unless Dalton massively improves on the Genji and they prove me wrong, maybe. But even though like Shockwave and even Rolf and Karkar on the backline are making massive improvements to this team, I still can't comfortably rate them any higher, just because it's such a bad meta for them. But yeah, anyway. I don't have much to say about them, but I do have quite a bit to say about number 10. That's Atlanta Reign. Ooh, where is Erster? Seriously, where is he? Where is Erster? I swear, all of this team's issues right now would be fixed if they would just play Erster, but he's gone. They refuse to play him for some reason, and I can't figure out why. Is there something going on behind the scenes that we don't know about Atlanta Reign? Because you can make the argument that, yeah, maybe they just thought Tracer was better, and they just had a bad read on it. They sort of underrated how valuable Genji is this meta, and they thought, we can probably just get away with running Tracer, so they played Edison. But Erster's Tracer is amazing. Like, did people just forget that Erster is an incredible Tracer player? Did we just forget last season when he was arguably one of the best Tracers in the league? Like, what happened? Like, Erster can play the Tracer, and then the best part about Erster is that he's an insane Genji, too. You can have the ability to switch to a Genji mid-round if you think, maybe Tracer isn't working out, actually. Maybe we should try and mirror this Genji comp that Toronto are absolutely destroying us with. Maybe we should run the Genji. If Erster was in, they could do that. And they actually tried doing it with Edison, but the poor guy, he just didn't look too good on the hero. I think he has a pretty similar situation that Dalton had in that being that they're just not well practiced enough on Genji to keep up with the players in the league that are really good at Genji. So they fall over because of that. Where is Erster? Seriously, where is he? I need to know where he is, because this entire team would be so good. I genuinely think they'd be a top 5 team if they would run Erster, but they just don't. Baby Bay left a tweet after they lost versus Toronto, which was quite interesting, and it sort of alluded to the fact that maybe he could be retiring soon, possibly. He said something along the lines of this could likely be my last tournament, and so he really wanted to win it, something like that. So maybe Baby Bay could be retiring, which would be a shame because I actually think he's an incredibly talented and underrated player. But if that is to happen, maybe, just maybe, we could finally see a lineup maybe where they run Edison on the Ashe or on the Widowmaker. And then we finally get to see Ursta playing Tracer or Genji or just all the things that Ursta is good at, which is pretty much every DPS hero. I seriously can't understand why they're not running Ursta. And even though my dreams for this team would be for them to finally just run with Baby Bay and Ursta again and just stop playing Edison. I don't think Edison is a bad player, but I really don't think he's up to the same standards as Baby Bay and Ursta are. So that would be the dream for this team, is if they would just stop running Edison and run Ursta instead, and then have a Baby Bay Ursta DPS lineup. That would be the dream for this team. But if Baby Bay does retire, I can definitely see Edison and Ursta going really far as well. So maybe that is a little bit of a silver lining for Atlanta Reign. But the fact that they literally have to drop who is probably their best player right now, just for the chance of them getting to run an optimal lineup, it's just a shame, honestly. It really is just a massive shame. Where is Ursta? Please tell me where Ursta is, and I'll finally drop this whole Atlanta Reign thing. Until then, they're not good. They're 10th place. 9th place. Another team that I'm incredibly disappointed in, because they're my boys. LA Valiant. What happened? Where'd Dreamer go? Where'd Dreamer go? Where'd Lastro go? What happened? Why are we now trying to play Apply on a hero that he hasn't played in over a year? And why are we trying to play Gig on a role that he's obviously not very comfortable on and that Dreamer was doing phenomenal on in the first place? Why? It's really sort of mind-boggling, because KSF was actually pretty damn good at the Genji and they didn't look bad at all. It was just they seemed to struggle so much because this meta is it's pretty heavily reliant on the Brig being really capable and being able to enable their Genji to just go in and do a shit ton of damage. But they couldn't do that because Apply just didn't look comfortable at all on the Brig. And they just looked really sort of weird without Lastro. They didn't seem comfortable at all. They didn't seem like they were able to compete. And it's so weird because, honestly, I feel like KSF was more than good enough at the Genji. He seemed perfectly fine at the Genji, to be honest. I feel like if Dreamer was playing and if Lastro was in the lineup to bring them a Brig player that's actually comfortable playing Brig, I mean, Lastro wouldn't even be on the Brig, but, you know, he'd be the map player, and then Rain would be able to play Brig more comfortably. If they were just able to have a Brig player who is comfortable on the hero, and then a main tank that not only are they more practiced with, but a main tank who is just generally a better main tank than Gig is in their lineup, I genuinely think they could have gone pretty far in this tournament. They could have actually completely replaced Toronto Defiance run, because I think they would have been able to get into the semifinals, and they would have probably done a lot better than Toronto did against Philly if they were just running Dreamer and Lastro. Apparently there's some drama going on behind the scenes, because on a vast stream, as soon as the starting lineup came up with Apply not being in the roster and Dreamer not being in the roster, there were some talks that happened where essentially Linkser just started giggling to himself and messaged Funny Astro and another player about how essentially there's a little bit of drama going on behind the scenes with the Los Angeles Valiant, which, if that's the case, that's such a massive shame, because that team is so good and they were so well coordinated and they had so much potential to be a title contender team, that I'm just going to be really disappointed if they crumble because of drama going on behind the scenes. It'll just be extremely disappointing, especially because they are so good and they could have gone so much further in this tournament if they just played their actual lineup instead of subbing in Apply and Gig for seemingly no reason other than behind the scenes drama. Yeah, it's just a massive shame, honestly, about the LA Valiant, and I've said it enough times, they could have gotten so much further. And here's another team that could have gotten so much further if they would have just played the meta. Number 8, Florida Mayhem. Why? You were doing so well last week. You were doing so well. You played Yaki on Genji. He looked really good. Yeah, granted, the match against Houston was pretty close last week, but they were also playing the meta pretty well. Like, you had a good grasp on the meta. You were doing great. Why did you decide to switch it up? I really can't fathom it, honestly. Florida, they had such a good grasp on the meta and they were doing really well with it. And then they just decided to change things up and run Yaki on Tracer instead, and it just looked worse. It looked so much worse. They didn't have a great showing against Houston at all, actually, I don't think. And honestly, again, they're another team that if they just played like they did the previous week and they ran Yaki on Genji, they could have honestly gotten to the semifinals. But I even said in my predictions video that if there was any team that I would think should be in the semifinals with Shock, should be in the finals even with Shock, who I predicted to win at the time, I thought it would be the Mayhem, but I was proven wrong. They decided to completely change their views on the meta, completely change their lineup, and well, what happened, happened. I don't have much else to say about Florida, honestly. I just think that the Tracer comps really are difficult to play against the Genji comps, and they didn't do it incredibly well either, and so they fell over because of it. Number 7, though, the team that Florida lost to is Houston Outlaws. I think this is another team that, again, could have gone way further than they actually did. It's the exact same situation as Mayhem, except I've placed them higher just because they beat the Mayhem, obviously. And it's kind of a little bit worse because not only did they change how they were playing the meta, but they didn't do it after a week of deliberating. They did it after a day. They beat the Florida Mayhem running the what is probably the meta strategy of the going super aggressive with the Genji, and they beat the Florida Mayhem really comfortably doing that. And then for whatever reason, the next day they were like, let's just run Tracer instead. And then essentially what happened was Dante didn't exist for a match because he was forcing himself to play Tracer versus Carpe, and just got headshot at the beginning of every single fight and died, and so 99% of what Dante was doing in this match was respawning, and then they still just refused to play Genji. They did pull it out at one point, and they looked so much better, and then the next map, they just stopped playing it again. I don't understand what happened with Houston in that match. I mean, I get that, like, you're not really going to pay attention to what's been successful in other matches, because if you're a team in the Overwatch League, you're not going to be looking at what other teams are doing successfully, right? You're going to more so be looking into yourself and be like, okay, what can we change about what we're doing to fight the teams that we're going to be playing against next? And they might have maybe watched a Philly match from the day before and been like, they seem to struggle a little bit dealing with Tracer, maybe. Just throwing that out there as something that they might have seen, and then they decide, okay, we should run Dante and Tracer. But when it's at the beginning of every fight, Dante just gets his head cleaved off by Carpe. At that point, you must seriously consider switching to Genji, and they did for a bit, and they looked decent when they did. It was definitely much, much closer than when they played Tracer. But then on the next map, immediately afterwards, they switch back to the Tracer and lose again. I can't understand what Houston were thinking in this match, in that match against Fusion. But they looked so good in the match against Florida that honestly I don't want to rate them any lower than 7th. So even though I think they could have been higher, I'm still going to rate Houston at 7th. In 6th, though, is a team that I think I might be overrating a little bit. But at the same time, I think that this one particular player on their team looked so good that I think they would be able to fairly comfortably beat every team that I've rated below them so far. And so I feel fairly comfortable putting them in 6th, even though it might be overrating them a little bit, and that's Washington Justice. Tuba was out of his mind on the Genji. Seriously. Tuba was crazy on the Genji. He was actually probably one of the better Genjis this weekend. I would maybe put him in the top 5. I haven't really thought about who else I'd put in that top 5. Actually, I'll do it right now. There's definitely Sparkle, definitely Eileen, definitely EQO. Those are definitely in the top 5. Who else do I put up there? Prophet. Prophet definitely belongs in that top 5. And then it'd honestly be between Tuba and probably Agilities. Maybe I'm forgetting some other people, but goddamn, Tuba was really good on the Genji. And I think even though Raw still didn't look particularly great, even though Aim God still hasn't exactly mastered Batiste, even though as a team, they still look generally quite uncoordinated. The meta being what it is right now, and the fact that they could just sort of throw shit at Tuba and let him carry, I think it means that this team would be more than capable of beating the teams that I've rated below them, and so I don't feel comfortable rating them any lower than 6th. Again, another thing that I wanted to mention, though, that it isn't just Tuba carrying. Like, I know I made it seem like that, but it isn't just that Tuba was ridiculous, because Stitch actually looked so much more comfortable on Ashe than he's looked on any other hero that I've seen him play this season, which is really good for him. I'm actually, like, I'm super impressed with how he played on Ashe, because I was starting to kind of worry. He didn't look good at all on Tracer. He looked a little bit shaky on McCree. He definitely wasn't comfortable playing Widowmaker. But on Ashe, he actually seems really comfortable. So I was impressed by Stitch's Ashe. And also, Janu just, like, is an incredible player. I feel so bad for him, because it's impossible to show what you're capable as an off-tank when you're on a team of players as incapable of, like, Raw. When Raw is your main tank, imagine playing off-tanks. Like, seriously, I feel so bad for Janu right now, but at the same time, he's so unbelievably skilled on Sigma that he impressed me in his match, especially against Shock. He actually held his own pretty well against Choi Hyobin, which is, I think that's really reputable. So shout out to Janu as well. Yeah, but for the most part, Tuba went nuts, and so I think this team would probably be every team I've put below them and are comfortably in 6th place, in my opinion. That might be a bit of a Pepega take, but honestly, I can't comfortably say that they would have lost to any of the teams that I've rated below them. So, yeah, 6th place, Washington Justice. Who would have thought that one? 5th place, though, Toronto Defiant, a team that is still struggling a little bit, I think. I definitely see areas where they don't look exactly perfect in terms of their coordination or in terms of their general play. But they have Agilities to play Genji, so it's kind of okay. Agilities obviously had a crazy Genji coming in. He absolutely went nuts. I do think Tuba is a slightly better Genji than he is, but Agility still went absolutely crazy on the Genji. He's always been a pretty nutty Genji player, though. At one point, I thought he was the best Genji in the world, like way back before Overwatch League Season 1. When he was on Immortals, he actually looked like, I argued he was the best Genji player in the world, up there with Who Are You? And honestly, I think it still shows. His Genji is pretty ridiculous. Though not perfect. There were definitely some moments where he'd maybe throw out a Dragon Blade that he just really didn't need to use. And that happened a lot more often than you'd think. It actually happened really often. And that's why I don't think he's quite as good at Genji as, like, Tuba is, for example. Because there were definitely times where he just sort of altered without thinking, I guess, and so it led to a really big waste of an ultimate, and in some cases led to them actually losing maps. Yeah, on Volskaya, I don't remember what team it was against. I think Philadelphia. But on Volskaya, basically, there was one where it was just an absolutely one fight. There were 2 players remaining on the enemy team, and he just threw out his blade. And then on the next point, they did that on first point on attack. So then for the next point, there's 10 seconds left and they don't have blade anymore. Like, I feel like Genji players at that level should really know to not use blade in that situation. And so I kind of give negative points to Agilities there for that kind of thing. But for the most part, his Genji was really good. And he was able to, he didn't look the greatest at it, but he was able to flex to the Mei when he needed to. And so I think that was actually pretty good for Toronto overall. As for the rest of Toronto, I think Numlocked actually looked really good on main tank. He looked very capable on Orisa, and whenever he got to play Ryan, he actually looked extremely comfortable, which is really good for him. I'm pretty proud of him being a UK main tank. I think that's pretty cool. Proud of you, Numlocked. Other than that, Nevix actually looked really good on the Sigma, except for that one time when he killed himself by accident. Nevix actually looked really good on Sigma for the most part. I think their backline actually was coming into their own really well. Cruz is finally starting to mesh well with this team, I think. And yeah, overall, they just looked really solid. Oh, Logix, of course. Logix. Well, I mean, as ever. Thank you, Mr. Logix. He's doing all the Logix things that he can. I mean, at this point, can you really expect much less from him. He's an insane hit scan. But yeah, other than that, Toronto, really good, though I think they still made a lot of errors in their gameplay that is holding me back from putting them above my number 4 team, which is the Dallas Fuel. And this is a hot take. I know this is a hot take, putting Dallas Fuel in 4th place when they didn't even make semifinals. Wow, how could I do that? Well, it's because their first match was against the team that won the whole thing, so of course they're gonna lose that one. But the worst part is they actually didn't look bad at all doing it. They actually looked really good, especially on King's Row. They looked pretty insane, to be honest. Doha impressed me a lot on the Genji. He was really, really, really strong on Genji. That's actually, you know what? Fuck Tuba. I'd put Doha in my top 5 Genjis before I'd rate Tuba, because Doha actually looked nuts. He actually looked nuts on the Genji, and at some points was even shutting down Sparkle. Like, that's pretty impressive, I have to say. So I gotta give Dallas points there. The rest of them as well looked really good. No, actually looked really good, which is something that I've not been able to say very often. Gamsu, obviously I've said before, Gamsu on Orisa is actually, in my opinion, one of the better Orisa players in the league. So Gamsu on Orisa, of course, is a big it's a big strength of his. Who else? Decay on Hitscan as ever looked really good. I mean, of course he does. He's Decay, but yeah, he looked insanely good on the Hitscan. And Crimzo, I think, even though, I mean, think about it for a second. When you think about his role and what role he plays, flex support, that's easily the most stacked role in all of Overwatch League. When you think about the flex support players in Overwatch League, the talent that's there, it's obviously going to be difficult for Crimzo to sort of match up to that. But honestly, he has been. He's actually been a really good flex support for this team. A lot better than any other flex supports they've ever had before. A lot better than Unko, I can say, for the very least. So, yeah, Crimzo, I think, is actually looking really good. And Paintbrush is really starting to find his place on this team as well. I think he's looking like a really decent main support for them. Overall, I just think that Dallas actually looked really good. And, yeah, they struggled a little bit on... what's the matter? On Lijiang. They struggled a little bit on Lijiang, but at the same time, Lijiang is also one of Paris's best maps. It's the only map, really, where they get to run Bembest on Reinhardt, which is by far his best hero. So, naturally, Paris do actually play Lijiang Tower really, really well. They're really strong on Lijiang Tower, so I don't really blame Dallas for not looking too strong on Lijiang. And then, on top of that, for whatever reason, they just decided to not run Doha on Genji on what is the map? Why am I forgetting map names? Gibraltar. They, for whatever reason, just decided not to run him on Genji on Gibraltar. Don't know what that was about. But whenever they did run Doha on Genji, they actually looked insane. And I think that bodes well for them, especially with Genji being so powerful, that they have an incredibly strong Genji player in Doha, and then also a secondary backup incredibly strong Genji player in Decay as well. So, yeah. That's really good for them. Anyway, this video is going on for incredibly long, so I'll try and get through the top 3 a little bit quicker. 3rd place, Philadelphia Fusion. Now, this is another hot take. This entire top 5 is kind of a big hot take top 5, honestly, but 3rd place, Philadelphia Fusion. They looked nuts. Honestly, this top 3 is pretty interchangeable. I genuinely think any of these top 3 teams could have won the whole thing if situations had gone very, very slightly differently. Take that as you will, but this top 3 I think is completely interchangeable, weirdly. But yeah, holy shit, EQO is a good Genji. God damn, he surprised me. I thought he'd be good coming in because he's classically always been a really good Genji player. I didn't think he would be that good. He was insane on the Genji. That clutch was ridiculous. That clutch was actually insane. That's one of the most insane plays I've ever seen in Overwatch League. So that should speak volumes to how good EQO was. Incredibly close game against Paris. I think it really did come down to the wire, but Paris were just sort of playing a better version of the meta, I think, and so they were able to win. Carpe, as ever, was nuts. Alarm, as well as ever, was really, really good on the Brigitte, which is weird to say because you wouldn't think Alarm on Brigitte, but it worked. And one player that I want to shout out for being completely fucking cracked, especially in the series against Paris, was Fiori. He was my MVP that series. Even though Paris won, Fiori was my MVP that series because Jesus Christ, the accretions that man was hitting. The way he was shutting down Sparkle, it felt like every time Sparkle went for a blade, he must have been shitting himself just because there's a Fiori around the corner loading up a rock to chuck at him. Like, he was insane that series. Fiori was out of his mind that series. And if he can keep playing like that, this team might be able to win in the future. Yeah, for the most part, Philadelphia Fusion, incredibly good. I honestly think if some situations would have gone very slightly differently, they could have won the whole thing. Yeah, just Fusion, incredibly good team. One thing I do want to say is that they still make some minor errors that could end up costing them maps and have ended up costing them maps. For example, in Blizzard World, where Carpe just pushed up way too far for no reason and ended up getting himself caught out. You really gotta, like, if you're a team like Shock, for example, you just don't make mistakes like that. Shock just do not make those mistakes. And I can't really say that Fusion are a better team when they still make those tiny errors. But goddamn, these players are so talented. They are so talented. And I think this is honestly the best Fusion has looked this entire season. They looked more coordinated than they have all season. All the players looked better than they have all season in that, especially in that finals. It was such an entertaining finals match too. I could go on about it forever. But unfortunately, I've already gone on for half an hour at this video. So moving on to second place, San Francisco Shock. I might be a hot take, but I still think San Francisco Shock are the best team in the world, despite their loss to Paris Eternal. I still think they're the best team in the world. Smurf, Arns, Violet, Striker, Choi. When you're on a team where Moth can be benched and they still play incredibly well and they still look like the best team in the world, I don't even know what to say at that point. This team is nuts. They were all playing completely off the charts. Good. And even though Rascal struggled on the Genji, I think it was an interview with Krusty. He said, like Rascal himself said that he didn't have much time to practice the Genji because they Shock as a team sort of went in thinking that Tracer was going to be a lot more valuable than Genji was. And so when they saw Genji was insanely good, I'm assuming on the first day, where they probably watched like Dallas versus Paris or something and saw that Genji's insane, they were probably like, oh, Rascal, you should practice Genji. And so I imagine Rascal only had a couple days at most to practice. So of course he's not going to look that good when he's playing against Sparkle, who's probably the best Genji in the world right now. Of course he's going to be outclassed. But I think given time and given a little bit more practice on the hero, Rascal, because of how fast he's learned heroes in the past, I think he will become incredibly good on Genji in coming weeks. And so in the future, with how stacked this team is and how quickly Rascal has learned heroes in the past, I think this team will probably become number one again fairly soon in coming weeks. And honestly, I think the main reason they lost was because they just didn't prepare on Genji enough. And that's why I put them in second, honestly, is because I would put them in first, but the fact that they didn't prepare Genji enough and the fact that they did go into it with a bit of a bad read on the meta shows me that they aren't perfect, and so they shouldn't be rewarded first place. I've given them second over Fusion, even though Fusion were in the finals, though, because I think with the style of this meta that Fusion were playing, which was definitely very different to the style that most teams found success on. The style that Paris and Guangzhou found success on, where they sort of just put all their resources into the Genji player, and then the Genji went in and popped off. It's not what Fusion were doing, and so I think Shock with their Tracer style with Striker on Tracer would have probably been able to take apart Fusion. So I don't think Fusion would be able to beat Shock because of the way they were sort of playing this meta, even though they were playing the Genji, which should, in theory, always beat the Tracer comp. I think the way they were playing it just made it so that Shock would have been coordinated enough to see what they were doing and counterattack in that way a lot easier against Fusion than they did against Paris. And so I think if it was a matchup against Fusion and Shock, I would put money on Shock winning that one. But obviously, they didn't beat the team that I have in number one, and that's Paris Eternal. Oh, fuck. Sparkle is so good at Genji. That man is crazy at Genji. I honestly, I don't want to sound like a bit of a toxic Paris hater, because I think, honestly speaking, a lot of the reason why they won is because Sparkle is insane on Genji. I don't mean to take away from the rest of their team when I say that, though, and I definitely don't mean to take away from their coaching staff when I say that, because their coaching staff is it's a big part to why I think the team was so successful, because they seem to have finally sort of registered, wait, we can't just force comps with brute force. We have to actually figure out a meta and play it, and figure out a strategy and play it. So they did that, and goddamn, they looked good doing it. Sparkle looked insane on the Genji, and Xe, I think, if not for Ans, Xe would probably be the best hit scan in the world right now. Maybe Happy, but if we're completely discounting Ans and pretending that he doesn't exist, Xe's probably my choice for second best hit scan in the world right now. The dude looked crazy. As for the rest of the team, Fielder does some crazy things on 200 ping, but at the same time, I'm still not sure that I think he's an incredibly good Baptiste. I don't know if he's on the same level as I would say a player like Violet is on Baptiste, and so I don't know if I would rate him as high as I would other players like Violet, like Izayaki, like Shu even. I don't think he's quite on that level, and so I feel sort of awkward saying that he's one of the best Baptiste players in the world, because I just don't think he is, though he is very good, and I think he does some incredible plays considering he's on 200 ping still. The team still definitely has issues. Paris as a whole, they still definitely have issues. Ben Best at points would just feed his brain out on Orisa for whatever reason. He would just push past his shield, take thousands upon thousands upon thousands of points of damage, and then just go back behind his shield for no reason whatsoever. He would just sort of peek out, take insane amounts of damage, and then jump back in. Maybe they were farming for window, but that's a really risky ult to farm for when all you really need to do is put resources into your Genji. But at the same time, maybe it worked for them. Tanks in general this meta need to play a little bit more of a selfless style. They're more so there to be methods of setting up their Genji. That's why pull is so useful right now. That's why Orisa is so useful right now, I should say, because pull, the pull ability is incredibly good for setting up a Genji to just do an insane amount of damage with a dash, or even while they're using Blade, so that they can just get massive value from playing the Genji. And so, yeah, Orisa is useful for that reason, and not so much because she's a good hero in general. And I think maybe that's why they were finding a bit more success than, say, a team like Shanghai did. But anyway, I'll talk about Shanghai in the APAC region video. For now, I think Paris are definitely the best team in the world at this meta for now, even though they had an incredibly close game with Shock when they weren't even playing the meta. Even though that happened, and even though they had an incredibly close game with Philadelphia when they were playing a slightly different take on the meta, I still think Paris are, like, without question, the best team in the world right now as far as playing this particular meta goes. But their issues still lie in that they are not a meta-proof team. They don't have the greatest of main tanks, and I just don't think that they're flexible enough to, in terms of what they're able to play with one 6-man core lineup. I don't think they're flexible enough to hold the title of #1 team, and I think when Shock come back with more practice with Rascal and Genji, and especially when the meta changes a little bit coming up with Brig nerfs, and Genji can't get away with just playing a ridiculously over-aggressive style, I think Paris will probably slowly fall down the rankings, and teams like Philadelphia and Shock, and maybe even Dallas, will probably slowly begin to rise up above them. So I don't know if they'll be able to hold the #1 title for very long, unless they do adapt to the meta and they prove me wrong. But for now, they're definitely #1. They won the Summer Showdown, so of course they are. But for the most part, I do want to let it be known that I don't think they'll be able to hold it for that long. But anyway, this is my longest video. Jesus Christ, 40 minutes I've been talking about this. It's 2:30 a.m. I'm going to stop this recording, I'm going to go to bed, and I'm going to sleep. Hopefully this video should be up as soon as possible with the APAC rankings video. Not sure when I'll be able to get that done. But yeah. Thanks for watching. If you made it this far, I'm incredibly impressed because I just talked for 40 minutes. Thank you so much for watching. Like I said, APAC video coming up soon, hopefully today, if not today, tomorrow. And yeah, again, I also want to say thank you so much for all the support. This channel has grown an incredible amount in the 3 weeks that it's been alive. This channel has grown an incredible amount, so thank you all so much for the really nice feedback. And I'm sorry this video took so long to upload. I really just wanted to make sure that I had a genuine good understanding of the meta before I ranked all the teams together, and I think I did an okay job. Let me know your power rankings, let me know your thoughts. If you have any questions, leave them down below as usual, and yeah, thanks so much for watching.